Welcome to the Fear Files channel. Today we're going to talk about those who came back. About people who entered the Bermuda Triangle and came out alive, but forever changed. Not everyone disappears in these waters. Those who returned tell the same story. And their stories are more frightening than the disappearance itself. On December 4th, 1970, pilot Bruce Gernon lifted his single-engine Beechcraft Bonanza into the sky over Andros, one of the Bahama Islands. A routine flight. Clear weather. Everything was going according to plan. Bruce had flown this route dozens of times. He knew every kilometer of airspace between the Bahamas and Florida. That day he was flying with his father and business partner. None of them could have imagined that in a few minutes they would find themselves at the center of a phenomenon that cannot be explained. At an altitude of 3,500 meters, Bruce noticed a strange cloud ahead. It was forming right on his course, growing out of nothing with incredible speed. The cloud had a perfectly elliptical shape, as if someone had drawn it with a compass in the sky. Gernon tried to go around it, but the cloud grew faster than the plane was flying. It seemed to follow him, anticipating his every maneuver. Bruce made the decision to fly through it. In the center of the cloud mass, he saw a tunnel. A perfectly straight tunnel stretching into the distance, its walls slowly rotating. The light inside was strange, milky white, unlike anything he had seen before. The instruments in the cockpit began to behave madly. The compass spun like a top. The altimeter showed both climbing and descending, although the plane was flying straight. The radio stopped working. Gernon says the feeling inside the tunnel was eerie. Complete silence. Even the engine noise seemed muffled, distant. The tunnel walls pulsated as if breathing. He felt that time was flowing differently. Each second stretched out, becoming viscous like honey. His passengers were silent, frozen in their seats. Later, Bruce's father would say that he couldn't move, as if the air around him had become thick and heavy. The tunnel spat them out over Miami Beach. Bruce immediately contacted the control tower. The controller was puzzled. He reported that there had been no aircraft on radar for the past several minutes. Moreover, according to fuel and flight time calculations, it turned out that Gernon had covered the distance from the Bahamas to Florida in an impossibly short time. Instead of 75 minutes, the flight took only 34 minutes. Bruce saved not only time, but also fuel. The tanks showed that much less fuel had been consumed than should have been. Gernon couldn't explain it. He was a professional pilot with many years of experience. He understood flight physics, navigation, meteorology. But what happened that day didn't fit into any scheme he knew. He encountered what he later called electronic fog, a phenomenon that warps space and time. After this incident, Bruce Gernon spent years researching the Bermuda Triangle. He contacted other pilots and sailors who had experienced something similar. He discovered that there were more such cases than people thought. Many pilots simply kept quiet, afraid they would be considered crazy or lose their licenses. But when they learned Gernon's story, they began to share their own. One cargo plane pilot told how in 1980 his Douglas got into a similar tunnel between Puerto Rico and Miami. The instruments failed. The engines were working, but the plane seemed to hang in the air. He saw stars through the clouds, although it was daytime. When the tunnel dissipated, he found himself 200 kilometers from where he should have been. The radar didn't register his movement. It was as if the plane had teleported. Charles Berlitz, a researcher and writer, devoted his life to studying the Bermuda Triangle. His book, published in the 70s, became a bestseller and drew worldwide attention to this mystery. Berlitz collected hundreds of testimonies from people who had been in the triangle and returned. He methodically recorded every detail, every little thing, trying to find a pattern. Berlitz discovered repeating elements in the stories of survivors. Almost everyone mentioned a strange fog or cloud. Many spoke of electronic malfunctions. Compasses went crazy. Radio communication was cut off. Watches stopped or began running incorrectly. Some felt disorientation, dizziness, nausea. Others described a feeling of unreality, as if they were in a dream. One of the most striking cases that Berlitz investigated occurred in 1967. A yacht with a crew of 5 people was sailing from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini. The weather was excellent. The sea was calm. Suddenly, the water around the yacht began to glow. Not phosphorescence, which sailors had seen thousands of times. This was something different. The glow came from the depths, rising to the surface, surrounding the vessel with a halo of greenish light. The yacht captain, an experienced sailor with 30 years of experience, said he had never seen anything like it. The light pulsated, became brighter, then dimmed, then flared up again. The yacht's engine stalled. All attempts to start it were futile. Electrical systems failed. Even the emergency radio didn't work. The crew was left in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by this eerie glow, without communication and without an engine. The glow continued for about 20 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it disappeared. The water became normal again, dark. The engine started on the first try, as if it had never stalled. All systems worked. When the yacht reached shore and the captain checked the chronometer, it turned out that an hour more time had passed than he had calculated. An hour that no one on board could explain. Berlitz documented dozens of similar cases. Fishermen from Key West told of strange lights that rose from the water and hovered over their boats. Commercial flight pilots reported sudden time lapses when the plane arrived at its destination earlier or later than it should have, for no apparent reason. Sailors on merchant ships described sections of ocean where compasses pointed in the wrong direction and stars in the sky were positioned incorrectly. One of the stories that Berlitz considered particularly credible concerned the crew of the tanker Sadufko. In 1968, the tanker was sailing through the Triangle to the Persian Gulf. At night, the watchman noticed a strange glow on the horizon. It was approaching at incredible speed. A minute later, the glow surrounded the tanker. All electronics on the ship failed. The huge tanker, loaded with oil, turned into a floating coffin without light, without communication, without navigation systems. The captain ordered the crew to stay in place and remain calm. The glow lasted all night. The crew didn't sleep, watching this phenomenon. Some sailors complained of headaches and nausea. One of the engineers lost consciousness and had to be carried to his cabin. When dawn broke, the glow melted away as if it had never been. All the tanker's systems turned on simultaneously, although no one had touched them. Berlitz noted that most survivors change after encountering the anomaly. They become thoughtful, withdrawn. Many refuse to enter the triangle's waters again. Some quit the sea or aviation altogether. Bruce Gernon continued to fly, but admitted that every time he flew over this zone, he felt anxiety. The captain of Sadufko retired a year after the incident, although before that he had planned to work for at least another decade. The psychological consequences of encountering the unknown can be devastating. One survivor, a private plane pilot who got caught in electronic fog in the 70s, began suffering from nightmares. He dreamed of the tunnel, the rotating walls, the feeling of falling into the abyss. He turned to psychotherapists, but no one could help him. How do you treat trauma from encountering something that science doesn't acknowledge exists? The fishing communities of the Bahamas and Florida are full of stories about strange lights. Old fishermen who have spent their entire lives in these waters say that the lights appear with a certain periodicity. Most often they are seen in the Bimini area and near Andros Island. The lights can be different colors: green, blue, white, sometimes reddish. They move underwater, sometimes come to the surface, occasionally rise into the air. Jose Martinez, a fisherman from Miami, saw the lights 3 times in his career. The first time in 1975. He was fishing at night not far from Bimini. Suddenly the water around his boat lit up. The light came from the bottom, from 30 or 40 meters. Bright, pulsating light that became more and more intense. Jose got scared. He started the engine and tried to leave. But the light followed him. Wherever he directed the boat, the light moved after it, as if tied by an invisible thread. This continued for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Jose prayed. He grew up in a Catholic family, but hadn't been religious for a long time. That night, he prayed like he hadn't prayed since childhood. The light suddenly went out. Jose stopped the engine and sat in the darkness, trembling. He didn't fish anymore that night. He returned to port and didn't go out to sea for 3 days. The second time the lights appeared in the 80s. Jose was fishing with 2 partners. This time the light was different, not green, but blue, almost electric. It arose not from the depths, but directly under the boat, as if someone had turned on a huge spotlight on the ocean floor. The boat found itself in the center of a light column. All 3 froze, unable to move, not from fear, but from some paralyzing effect. Jose remembers trying to raise his hand, but couldn't. His body wouldn't obey. He saw that his partners weren't moving either. One of them was trying to say something, but his lips didn't move. They were like statues. The light held them for a minute, maybe 2. When it went out, all 3 fell, as if the invisible force holding them had disappeared. They were silent for a long time, trying to comprehend what had happened. No one wanted to speak first, afraid of seeming crazy. The third case was the most frightening. Jose was fishing alone, which he rarely did. It was evening, the sun was setting. Suddenly, he saw a light on the horizon. Bright, white light that rose from the water and went into the sky. A column of light connecting the ocean and clouds. Jose stopped the boat and watched. The column held for several minutes, then began to move. It glided across the ocean's surface, approaching the boat. Jose turned the boat around and gave full throttle. The engine roared. The boat raced across the waves, bouncing and hitting the water. Jose didn't look back. He knew the light was behind him. He felt it with his skin, with every cell of his body. Only when the shore appeared in the distance did he dare to turn around. The light was gone. The ocean was empty. Jose reached the port, pulled the boat onto the shore, and swore he would never go out to sea alone again. Other fishermen confirm his stories. Many have seen the lights, although not all are ready to talk about it publicly. Locals consider it a bad sign. To see the lights means to attract the attention of something that is better left alone. There are sections of ocean that they avoid, even if there's a good catch there. Life is more important than fish. One old fisherman named Joseph told Berlitz the story of his grandfather. In the 20s of the last century, Joseph's grandfather was fishing near Andros. It was a full moon, the sea was calm. Suddenly the water around his boat began to boil. Not from heat, but from some movement below. Something huge was rising from the depths. Grandfather saw a silhouette, a dark mass, larger than any whale. The mass was rising, the water bubbled and churned. Then the mass stopped without reaching the surface. Grandfather saw a glow emanating from it. A dim, bluish glow. It lasted for several minutes. Then the mass began to descend. The water calmed down. Grandfather sat in the boat, unable to move from fear. When he returned to the village and told about it, the old men nodded. They knew. They had seen similar things. Something lives in these waters that is better not to disturb. Joseph himself saw something similar in the 60s. He was fishing with his brother. It was early morning, the sun was just rising. Suddenly his brother screamed and pointed at the water. Joseph looked. A huge object was swimming under the boat. Not a fish, not a whale. The object was metallic, smooth, with lights on the sides. It moved silently, smoothly, like a submarine. But no submarine was that big, and none glowed from within. The object swam under them and disappeared into the depths. Joseph and his brother were silent for the rest of the day. When they returned home, they decided not to tell anyone. Who would believe them? They'd think them crazy or drunkards. Joseph kept this story secret until old age. Only when Berlitz came to collect material for his book did Joseph decide to tell. By that time, his brother had already died, and Joseph felt the story should be preserved. Similar stories about underwater objects are common among triangle fishermen. Many have seen something that doesn't look like known marine creatures or technology. Objects of various shapes and sizes, with glowing panels or windows, moving at impossible speeds. Some rise to the surface, others go into the depths so quickly that the water doesn't have time to close behind them. Officially, none of these cases are confirmed. The U.S. Navy does not acknowledge the presence of unidentified underwater objects in the region. But unofficially, sailors on warships say the same thing. They see objects on sonars, objects that move faster than any known submarine, objects that appear out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere. One retired Navy officer who agreed to speak only on condition of anonymity said that in the 70s his destroyer was tracking an underwater object in the Bermuda area. The object was moving at a speed of over 100 knots. This is impossible for any modern technology. Even torpedoes don't develop such speed underwater. The object maneuvered, made sharp turns that would tear any submarine apart from overload. The destroyer tried to establish contact. No response. The object ignored all attempts at communication. Then it simply disappeared from the screens. It didn't go beyond the range of the sonars. It literally disappeared as if someone turned off the light. One moment it was on the screen, the next it wasn't. The officer says the crew was in shock. They checked all the instruments. Everything was working normally. The object simply ceased to exist in one moment. When the destroyer returned to base, the entire crew was interrogated. They were ordered to keep silent about what happened. The official report stated, false contact, equipment malfunction. But the officer knew the truth. It wasn't a malfunction. They saw something real, something that didn't fit into any framework of known science. Survivors from the Triangle are united by one thing. They know the official version is a lie. They're told it's hallucinations, instrument errors, fatigue, stress. But they know what they saw. They know what they experienced. And this knowledge changes them. Some withdraw, refusing to discuss what happened. Some become obsessed, devoting their lives to finding answers. Some try to forget, drowning out memories with alcohol or work. Bruce Gernon chose the third path. He became a researcher. His book, The Fog, became one of the key documents about the Bermuda Triangle phenomenon. In it, he described in detail his experience and theories. He received thousands of letters from people who had experienced something similar. Each letter added a new piece to the puzzle. With each testimony, the picture became clearer and at the same time more confusing. Gernon discovered that anomalies occur more often at certain times of the year. December and August show peaks of activity. Is this related to the Earth's position relative to the Sun? Magnetic storms? The tidal forces of the moon? No one knows. Gernon compiled graphs, tables, maps. He tried to find a pattern that would allow predicting when and where the next event would occur. But the phenomenon seemed chaotic. Sometimes months passed without a single incident. Then several cases occurred in 1 week. Sometimes anomalies appeared in well-known points. Other times they arose in places where nothing had happened before, as if someone was moving the anomaly zones like pieces on a chessboard. One of the most eerie aspects of survivor testimonies is the feeling of presence. Many say that when they were in the fog or in the anomaly zone, they felt they weren't alone, that someone or something was watching them. An intelligent presence that was evaluating, studying, making a decision to release or to take. David Collins said that when the Sylvania was going through the fog, he felt a gaze, an invisible gaze directed at him. He looked around, but no one was there, only white haze. But the feeling didn't go away. Someone was looking at him from a fog. Someone was evaluating him, weighing him, deciding his fate. This feeling was so strong that David still wakes up at night in a cold sweat, feeling the same gaze. Jose Martinez described something similar. When the light rose from the depths and surrounded his boat, he felt a mind. Not a human mind, something else. Cold, detached, studying him like an insect under a microscope. Jose says that at that moment he understood. Whatever it was, it could do anything it wanted with him. And he couldn't do anything about it. He was completely helpless. This feeling of helplessness haunts many survivors. They encountered a force that exceeds any human understanding. A force that can manipulate time, space, matter. That can make a ship or plane disappear without a trace. Or it can release, allow a return, but with a clear understanding. You survived not because you were strong or smart. You survived because you were allowed to survive. Berlitz, in his book, put forward several theories about the nature of the phenomenon. One of them is related to Atlantis. He suggested that at the bottom of the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle area, there might be remnants of an ancient civilization. Perhaps some technologies that still function, causing anomalies. Crystals or devices generating energy fields that affect electronics and create temporal distortions. This theory gained support after the discovery of underwater structures near Bimini. In the 60s, divers discovered what they called the Bimini Road, a series of flat stones laid out in the form of a road on the ocean floor. The stones had a regular rectangular shape, and many researchers claimed this was the remains of an ancient structure. Skeptics said it was a natural geological formation. Debates continue to this day. But for Berlitz, this was proof. If there are ancient structures on the bottom, perhaps there are ancient technologies. Technologies we don't understand, that work on principles unknown to modern science. And perhaps these technologies sometimes activate, causing the phenomena we observe. Another theory concerns underwater gas emissions. Methane trapped under the ocean floor sometimes releases in large bubbles. When such a bubble rises to the surface, it reduces water density. A ship caught in a zone of reduced density can lose buoyancy and sink instantly. If the gas ignites, which is also possible, this explains the fire phenomena sometimes observed in the triangle. But this theory doesn't explain the disappearance of aircraft. It doesn't explain temporal anomalies. It doesn't explain electronic failures and glowing. Methane emissions are a real phenomenon, but they can't be the only cause of all the strangeness of the triangle. The third theory is magnetic anomalies. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the few zones on Earth where magnetic north and true north coincide. This can create navigation problems. But modern navigation systems take magnetic declination into account. Experienced pilots and sailors know about this. Magnetic anomalies can explain some cases, but not all. Gernon proposed a combined theory. He believes that the triangle combines several factors: geomagnetic anomalies, underwater gas emissions, unusual atmospheric conditions, and perhaps something else that we cannot yet detect or understand. This combination creates ideal conditions for the occurrence of temporal and spatial distortions. But even this theory doesn't satisfy everyone. Too many unexplained details. Too many cases that don't fit into any scheme. Testimonies about intelligent presence, about underwater objects, about gazes from the fog. All this goes beyond any physical theories. Some researchers suggest extraterrestrial intervention. Perhaps there's an alien base in the triangle, an underwater base where they study Earth and humans. Ships and planes entering the zone become objects of study. Some are released, others are taken for more detailed examination. This theory seems fantastic, but it explains many aspects of the phenomenon. The intelligent presence that survivors feel, the underwater objects that sailors see, technologies capable of manipulating space and time. If we assume that we're dealing with a civilization thousands or millions of years more advanced than ours, much becomes clear. But there's no proof. There are only testimonies, statements, stories. And in our world, testimonies are not considered evidence, especially when they concern the impossible. Official science requires physical data, repeatability of experiments, clear cause and effect relationships. The Bermuda Triangle phenomenon provides none of this. Survivors continue to live with their memories. Some established communities support groups for people like them, people who have encountered the unknown and are trying to cope with the consequences. They meet, share stories, support each other, because only they understand what they went through. Only they know what it's like to see the edge of reality and look beyond it. Bruce Gernon continues his research. He conducts lectures, writes articles, participates in documentaries. He has become the face of the phenomenon, a person who not only experienced the anomaly, but also devoted his life to studying it. He's criticized by skeptics, called a fantasist and a liar. But Gernon is adamant. He knows what he saw, and he knows it's real. Charles Berlitz died in 2003, but his work continues to live. His book is republished, translated into new languages, inspires new generations of researchers. Berlitz opened the world to the mystery of the triangle, made it part of popular culture. Thanks to him, millions of people learned about the phenomenon and began asking questions. Fishermen continue to fish despite their fear. The sea is their life, their bread. They can't just leave, even knowing the danger. But they become more careful. They watch the water, the sky, the lights. They carry amulets, pray before going to sea. Old superstitions are returning because modern science provides no protection from ancient fears. Sailors on merchant ships try to avoid the triangle when possible. They plot routes around it, even if this increases time and fuel consumption. Companies are dissatisfied, but crew safety is more important than profit, at least for those captains who know what hides in these waters. Commercial airline pilots fly over the triangle daily. Thousands of flights pass through this zone without incident. Statistics show that the percentage of accidents in the triangle is no higher than in other places. But statistics don't account for cases that aren't reported, cases that are attributed to technical malfunctions or human error, cases that are kept silent because the truth is too strange. The military knows more than they say. They have data, radar recordings, sonar readings, crew reports. They see objects that shouldn't exist. They record anomalies that don't fit into official science. But all this is classified. The public is told that the triangle is a myth, a journalist's invention. And in secret archives lie tons of documents proving the opposite. Some former military personnel, after retiring, begin to speak. They risk their reputation, pension, sometimes freedom, violating non-disclosure agreements. But they feel people have the right to know. That hiding the truth is a crime. Their testimonies add new details to the overall picture, making it even stranger and more frightening. So what's happening in the Bermuda Triangle? Why is this zone so special? Why are anomalies concentrated here? Maybe it's a place where the veil between worlds is thinner, where our reality touches something else. Maybe portals to other dimensions, to parallel universes open here. And ships and planes, falling into these portals, go where there's no return. Or maybe there's something ancient here, something that was here long before humans appeared, something that sleeps at the bottom of the ocean and sometimes wakes up, something whose presence distorts the laws of physics within a radius of hundreds of kilometers, something that watches us, studies us, sometimes interferes in our lives. Survivors don't know the answers. They know only one thing. What they encountered is real. It's not a hallucination, not an error, not a fabrication. They saw the edge of the abyss and by some miracle didn't fall into it. They returned to tell their story, and their stories must be heard. Because if we ignore their warnings, if we continue to consider the triangle a myth, sooner or later we'll pay for it. Sooner or later something will happen. Something so big and obvious that it will be impossible to hide or explain. And then it will be too late to prepare. The triangle is waiting. It has always waited. Patiently, silently. The water is calm. The sky is clear. But beneath the surface, behind the veil of normality, something hides. Something ancient and powerful. Something that takes ships and planes. Something that sometimes releases witnesses so they can tell the world. Tell and warn. But the world doesn't listen. The world continues to fly and sail through the triangle, ignoring the warnings. Because believing in the impossible is scary. It's easier to deny, easier to laugh, easier to call survivors crazy. Until it touches you personally. Until you find yourself in the center of the fog, surrounded by rotating walls, with frozen instruments and stopped time. Until you feel the gaze from the abyss. And then you'll understand that the survivors were telling the truth. That their fear was justified. That the triangle is not a myth. But will you have a chance to return and tell about it? Or will you become another name on the long list of the disappeared? You won't decide that. What lives in the triangle will decide. Thank you for being with us on the Fear Files channel. Remember, not all mysteries have answers. Some of them are better left unsolved. But curiosity is part of human nature. And we will continue to seek the truth, even if it scares us to death. Retriclawed can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.